guys? Clutch Fan 37 here, bringing you the Warrior Evo Pro Warp lacrosse head review. Before I dive into the review, just a little background information. For one, Warrior did not send this to me in any way, shape, or form. I didn't even bother asking them for one, for a sole fact that it is a $180 product. Something that I can't really assume they would give out. And in the past, I've had some issues with Warrior and their whole customer service thing. So I went out to a store actually the day they came out and bought one. And they're not paying me in any way, shape, or form to do a review. I just figured if I had the money laying around, which I kind of did, that I would go out and buy one and do a review. And plus, I've always really wanted to try the Warp Pro ever since seeing pictures of it on social media or whatever. And because I feel like if I get even 1,000 people to watch this video, if any of those people are on the border of buying one or not, maybe my opinions and my review can help them in making the decision of either getting two heads at $90 a piece or one Warp Pro. So getting the actual box itself, it's ideally the same box. The only thing is the outer casing is a little different. It says Warp Pro, Evo up on the top, made for quick release, and then down here it says whip level 3 or 1. On the side just has sim rail, lock throat, and true offset. The back is pretty cool. It talks about all the information about the Warrior Evo Pro Warp. The warps in general, as well as pockets, and the whip level 1 to 4, which I'll get into in a minute. And on the side just says Warp Pro, made in the USA. Once you get the case off, if you've seen any warps in store or any videos of it, you probably saw these boxes because, being honest, this is one of the cooler things that I've ever seen a lacrosse head come in. So you got the warp box, same thing, has a warp pattern on it going all around, magnetic box, which is pretty cool, and I'm struggling. Once you open it up, just like I'm sure you've seen, it's got this nice little nut hut shaped cup thing that the pocket sits in, the warp. And what's unique about this is, for one, with all the other warps, when you open it up, underneath they had a little baggie that had all the products in it. It's like 2 locking bolts, 2 screws, 2 ball stops to replace it. But this one came with none of that. It didn't even come with a head screw, which, ideally, you shouldn't have to worry about. If you own a lacrosse stick, you should have a screw laying around or two or whatever. But another interesting thing is right here. And you're definitely going to want to pause the video and read this. Hopefully it's close enough to where you can. There's enough lighting. But this is a little card that says once you remove the head, you agree to the terms down below, which basically says you can't show this product or give this product to any other lacrosse company in the off chance that they will recreate it or make something, simply because Warrior is still working with patents on it. But here's this place card. Go ahead and pause the video and read it. So it's very interesting. When I saw this and I read over it, I really don't care. It is what it is. But anyway, getting into the actual Warp Pro itself, I'll go over aesthetics and then get into the actual review. So obviously it still has the warp pocket to it. That's the whole idea behind it. Little couple changes. Down here it says made in the USA. It still has the technological, that's not true. The futuristic hexagonal look all around the head with the pattern. Obviously it's the Evo 4 shape, Evo 4X ideally. Nothing too crazy, still has this fancy jewel. Down here, as you'll see, there is no more big long locking bolt that goes in the head. It just has the standard lock throat, which we'll talk about in a second. And on the back, which I wish they would have changed a little bit, is in order to tell which whip version it is, they have a sticker, W1 or W3 for the whip factor. So other than that, the yellow Kevlar is now white, and I don't even think it's Kevlar anymore. I think it's just a similar material. But it's now white, which is very nice because the old yellow made it look like an old school jockstrap and just didn't really please me a whole lot. The outside material is the same as the original warps, and the Warp Next, same with the top parts. The only things that have really changed pocket-wise and aesthetic-wise is the middle portion is now very soft, and as you can see, it's almost as thick as like a crosslace strings would be, which is a little nicer. It has a nice softer feel. If you felt a Warrior Next, it's the exact same middle portion feeling. And the coolest part to me is these raised shooting strings. They're no longer flat. They're actually legitimately raised, so it's almost like they took 2 or 3 sets of material and stacked on top of each other. And that's where the whip factor comes in. I believe the whip 1 these are less raised, and the whip 3 these are more raised to give you a bit more whip and feel. So that's the aesthetics of it. Getting to the actual pocket itself, I really like the idea of creating a softer channel using a different material that allows the ball to really, you know, move around in the pocket. So it moves around very easily. Problems with the Warp H pockets was once you had a pocket, wherever it was, that's where the ball stayed consistently. Warp S, it moved around a little bit more, but it was still, you know, pretty much stuck in the middle. And the Warp S, the actual pocket itself was flat as opposed to kind of beefier, which, you know, great step up. The Warp Pro is designed for a mid to mid-low pocket with one-hand cradling in mind. You can see it's a very large opening down here. Once you get a ball in there, it sits there nice and snug. You can see, I mean, the ball really can't go through there unless this middle portion rips. But getting in the actual pocket with this Kevlar-ish material, it really bumps it out and really holds the ball in. Still legal, of course, but that's pretty nice, you know, being able to have a shifty pocket and cradling one-handed and having the ball really sit in a little nutsack there is great. So other things I noticed, and this is just one thing I have actually confirmed with Warrior after they direct messaged me on Instagram, which I'll get into later. But if you look at the pocket, the middle portions and middle diamonds are actually not symmetrical. They're almost D-shaped. You can see this one most certainly and this one. And I mean, even if you go around and shift the pocket around, you can still tell they're more D-shaped. They're more angled. They're almost shorter on this side, longer on this side, which I really don't like. You know, you get a product that Warrior talks about being machine made and everyone's the same, and you get inconsistent diamond shapes. I just don't really like it, and it actually makes the channel off-centered. It's almost like this side of the pocket on the left here, or right if you're looking at it, it's almost like this side of the channel is a bit wider and longer, so the ball's not going to sit directly in the middle. It's going to sit a little off-centered. So that's one thing I really don't like and don't understand. I noticed that in pictures as well as looking at it. Go on their Instagram or anyone who offers this on their online websites and look. You can tell that the middle ones are off-center. After I posted this on my Instagram, Warrior direct messaged me and said, hey, how are your initial thoughts? What do you like about it? And I just straight up was just telling them. I won't go into detail, but one of the things I mentioned was the inconsistent diamond shapes down the middle, and I said the channel is off-centered. And they said something along the lines of, well, maybe your pocket is, you know, maybe you had a ball in there and the ball sat in the little left and you pulled it out. But ideally, if you look at any pictures, you'll notice it's the same thing. All the diamonds are off-centered and more D-shaped. So that's not one thing I really like. Especially the fact that, you know, Warrior messaged me and tried to tell me that it was my fault because I left the ball in the pocket in a different area, or maybe I didn't pound the pocket right in the middle. Whatever it is, but the, you know, the pictures do it justice to look on anything. Getting the actual playability, I got the Whip 3 because I use a lot more whip in my sticks than the average person does, and one thing that I really like and maybe disagree with a little bit is their whip scale. They have a whip scale going 1 to 4. Now, I don't like it because typically a whip scale goes 1 to 10. For anyone on social media, Instagram, obviously that's where I post most of my stuff. A lot of people say, like, how much whip, and most people, I think the universal scale is 1 to 10, which is good because it's easy to gauge, but it's also difficult because a 7 to me could be a 9 for someone else. Now, having a whip scale of 1 to 4, it's very easy to tell, but it also doesn't give a lot of information. You know, they have the Whip 1 version, which a lot of people will say probably doesn't have a whole lot of whip, and the Whip 3, which has a decent amount more. I was able to throw out the Whip 1 and a Whip 3, and the whip difference isn't very big. It's not easily noticeable unless you really mess around and play with it. I assume the Whip 4 will be implemented in the Burn Pro and the Regulator Max warps that come out later. Don't ask me, don't have information on those. Beginning the actual pocket, when I first got it, same thing as the Warp, you know, the first couple passes it felt a little goofy because I wasn't used to the throwing motion. But once you're going straight overhand with this, it's really, you know, the same as any other Warp. It's going to go right where you want it to. The only problem I had with that, though, is since the outer parts are thick and the middle part is a lot softer and looser, you'd think that there'd be a lot more of a channel, but right out of the box it really isn't. The ball is able to rattle around a decent amount. Part of that being the middle part is softer, so the ball will shake. But one thing, I'll be real quiet and listen. Even if you're cradling like that, a little power cradle, you're going to feel it hitting the sides of the head, which I don't like. You'd think that by now they would have made it a little easier to where it just sits naturally in the channel, especially if they're marketing it as the most consistent stick out there. You want something that's going to sit naturally in a channel and not move side to side and just come out straight every time. I noticed that with passing, sometimes if the ball, quick passes, got stuck here for a quick stick and I threw with it, it'd fly off to the side. Same problem I had with the warps beforehand, some problem I think that some other people have had. So one thing I wish they would have changed is maybe made the insides a bit more inward and a bit tighter, so that way you actually have more of a natural channel as opposed to this big bulky one. But other than that, the whip 3, it's a lot easier to get outside shots with because it adds a bit more whip when you shoot, but when you go to pass, there's not a whole lot. The one-handed cradling with the warp, especially down here, it feels very nice. What's nice about having a softer middle portion in a warp is if you go to cradle one-handed and dodge and you go to pass right after, even if the ball's stuck right here straight off the pass, it's going to naturally go through the channel and come straight out every time. So that's one thing I really like. Another thing with the warp is, it's a mid-low pocket, and as you can see mine, it's more baggy than other people's, and the reason being, after playing with it for a couple hours and shooting with it, I realized that the mid-low pocket was really not to my liking. I use more of a mid pocket that shifts all around, which with the warp, the middle portion does shift around a decent amount, which is nice, but the pocket is engineered and geared towards a mid to mid-low no matter what you do. So what I did was I took my trusty handy-dandy pocket pounder and I stretched the living hell out of it in the middle here, so from here up. And what that did is, since these middle portions and middle locks are a little looser, it actually pushed the pocket up for me and stretched this out and tightened these up, which I think anyone who owns a warp should definitely spend 5-10 minutes really stretching the pocket out with a baseball bat or a pocket pounder so that you really get that depth and you get just the most consistent pocket possible. Because believe it or not, a warp right out of the box and a warp that you've been using for a month will play differently, in the sense that the knots and everything in the warp are not very tight. The more you stretch it out, the more they tighten up, the more the pocket bags out a little bit, and the more whip and hold you're going to get. So I was able to stretch mine out and add whip and hold to the stick just by stretching these out. And as you can see, these middle portions right here where the diamonds touch, another thing, you can see this one's longer and a little looser than this side. It just goes back to the middle channel. But I was able to stretch those out and give it more of a mid pocket, which is still going to be able to shift low and cradle the ball. But once I go to pass and shoot, it's going to go right in the middle of the head as opposed to staying, more mid to mid-low where the pocket is engineered. So that's a pro and a con. The reason it's a pro is because if you're someone like me who likes an overall mid baggy pocket, if you get the Warp Evo Pro Warp, and you stretch the pocket out basically in the mid and a little higher, it's going to add more whip and more hold to your pocket, as well as allow the ball to really shift around completely. So that's a pro. Someone like me, I spent $180 on this head. I'm going to want it to perform like an $180 head, and that's exactly what I did to change it. It's a con because if you get the head and you just keep it as it is and you don't worry about stretching it, the pocket's naturally going to sit mid to low. You're going to have the same problems I had, where after trailing one-handed and doing like a dummy dodge and going to pass, it'll naturally come out and throw the same. But when you go to shoot two-handed, obviously, the ball's just going to sit right down here. So when you go to shoot, it's going to take some extra time to travel, which is going to make your shot a little slower. Quick release, yes. Shot speed, slower, because it has to travel throughout the entire pocket. And you also run into the potential factor that, the pocket's sitting here and you go to take a quick sidearm snap or whatever is around defender, the ball could potentially go out any of the sides because it's not locked in the diamond, or locked in the pocket and locked in diamonds, because the channel itself is not stretched out. Beforehand, it was more along the lines of looking like this, where it was very wide, there wasn't much of a channel to it. So that's a con in my opinion. The race shooters is very nice. It does add some whip and some feel. Like the old warps, it hit the top of the head, and then with the Warp S, they changed that a little bit. But as you can see, I have grass stains on the middle, and that's simply because the ball is still hitting the top of the head with the Warp Evo Pro. I personally don't care. I like it to hit the top of the head, so that for me is a con, or a pro, I'm sorry. But for other people, you know, that was always an issue. They didn't like it, and they wish they would change that, so not sure exactly what Warrior's done to change that up. Other things to talk about, I'm sorry it's gone 15 minutes, but there's just a lot of information with this thing. One thing I noticed is if I do throw a fake, the ball will actually sit right here under the shooting string because this middle channel is a lot softer, and it adds a bit more whip. So if you're someone that likes to throw toe drags or fakes, if you stretch the pocket out, this will allow for that. You know, you can see, throw a fake, and it just kind of sits a little higher up in the head, right under this bottom shooting string, which is really nice. So other than that, I mean, it's still Warrior Warp. It's a great product and great innovation. And if you actually take the time to stretch it out and mess around with it, it could be something you really enjoy. I personally, after stretching it out, like it a lot more than how it was originally. I know it's not the mission of the Warp and not the purpose. You're not supposed to, but, you know, $180, I'm going to make it as close to perfect for me as possible. So other little things before we go, Warrior's offering a 30-day money-back guarantee or something. I haven't seen anything about it yet, but I'm sure within the next week they'll post about it. Supposedly what that means is after 30 days, if you don't like it, you can send it in and get a different version. So if you get the whip 1 and it doesn't have enough whip, and even after breaking it doesn't, you can get a whip 3. I also think they said something along the lines of if you do buy it, probably strictly through Warrior or through a manufacturer, or not a manufacturer, Warrior is, jeez, an online store, you can return it and potentially get your money back, which I think is great. That says that Warrior understands that this isn't for everyone, and they're very confident in their product. So, other than that, priced at $180, you can find them in a lot of select retailers. If you are going to pick one up and you don't like it right away because the ball is just stuck here in the pocket and it doesn't have a lot of whip, do what I did and simply just take a baseball bat or a pocket pounder and really, you know, stretch from here up, and that's going to give you a mid to mid-high pocket when you go to shoot, but also when you go to create one hand, it's going to shift low. So overall, it just